Hi everybody, I'm Dr. Kat Patrick of Dreaming Spires Home Learning, and I want to talk to you today about teaching Shakespeare to teens. And I'm just going to give you 5 quick ideas for how to teach teens. And I'm using as my example Twelfth Night. One of my tips that is like a pre-tip is I really like the Oxford School Shakespeare books. They have big margins. They've got really great notes, good essays at the beginning and some essays at the end. So they're my edition of choice for Shakespeare. The first thing that I think is a good tool for doing Shakespeare with teens is to get this series of books called Shakespeare Stories. Now, Twelfth Night's actually in Shakespeare Stories 1, not 2. And it's orange, not blue, but I couldn't find my orange one to show you, but it looks kind of like this, Leon Garfield. And he is excellent at telling the story of the Shakespeare play in pretty good detail. He might leave out some of the more kind of side plots going on, but it's a good one for getting a feel for what's happening. So I really like to start off by reading the story in Shakespeare Stories before we start talking about the play. So that's number A, letter A, get the Oxford Schools edition. And number 1, get Shakespeare Stories. It comes in the 1 volume with both books in it now, hardback, or you can get the one I showed you that was an older version. The other thing about doing Shakespeare with teens is they often prefer to have some kind of practical problem to look at, as opposed to going line by line through the play. We do read some of the play, but I tend to focus on scenes or issues. So when we were doing Macbeth recently, we wanted to start off with how are we going to have our witches look if we were to make this play? And they went away and looked up pictures, images, and videos of witches online, the Macbeth witches, how they've been portrayed in films and on images, and came away with what they thought maybe they liked. And we would watch the different video snippets and things like that. In the end, we chose a modified version of a creature in a video game that was really cool. And so when we're reading about the witches and things like that, we all have a picture in our heads of what our witches look like. Before we talk about a specific scene, though, I will have the students do some copy work, maybe on a page. Let me just grab a page and show you the kind of thing that I would have them copy work. So we might talk about in Twelfth Night how Viola's had she's been shipwrecked in a strange land where actually her people are not welcome, and so she disguises herself as a boy. She starts to work for the local lord who's in love with this woman. He sends Viola dressed up as the boy to go woo her for him, and in the end she quite fancies him. The woman, whose name is Olivia, fancies Viola as the boy, who she calls herself Cesario. And we have an example of a long speech here where Malvolio chases after him and gives back the ring. Well, gives her a ring, saying she's not going to have this ring, take it back. And she's like, I never gave her a ring. But it's at the end of this, she realizes that the lady's in love with her. So it's a really nice little speech to copy out. And then you can talk about the plot. You can talk about her realization that Olivia's in love with her. You can talk about the language, and in this case, it's blank verse. and ends with what we call a capping couplet with the last two lines rhyming to show that it's the end of a scene. So anyway, you can pick out different long scenes to copy from. Festi's songs are quite good. This great scene where Malvolio's getting a letter that some people are playing a trick on him. They write as though they're Olivia, and they write as though she's in love with him, and he fancies himself. He's just basically the butler, but he fancies that she would be in love with him. And then you have this bit here, which you can see it's set out differently from the other ones, so it's written in prose instead of verse, so they could copy that out instead. And I think it's one of the great scenes that I make a problem or an issue for teens to work out, which is how would you produce or act this scene here with Malvolio getting a letter, reading it, but in the meantime the people who sent it to him, Sir Toby and Sir Andrew and those kind of people, are watching him, and the comedy you can get from the scene is amazing. So have them act it out. So what have we got to? We've got get the right edition, read Shakespeare stories, do some copy work, act it out, and finally read it somewhat, some of it, read it together. And they actually enjoy doing that in a group. And they will even put on voices, which is quite nice when they try to put voices on, so that just lets them kind of distance themselves from the fact that they're reading out loud. Do they do it easily? There is sometimes people kind of struggle with reading Shakespeare out loud, so that might be a good reason to take your copywork passage, like the one where Viola realizes that Olivia's in love with her, and have the students do share lines. So one reads one line, one reads another, going down like that, just so they've already had an experience seeing that line, and will have some ability to read that more or less cold. And maybe have a bit more confidence. So those are some ideas for getting students used to Shakespeare. Of course, finding a good film. I usually prefer to watch the film afterwards, or snippets of films to make comparisons of, like, let's look at how different people have done the Malvolio letter scene, and which do you think is funnier and why, is a good discussion to have as well. And there is a great film of Twelfth Night, an old one, that had, let me think who's in it, Toby Stevens and Helena Bonham Carter and Imogen Stubbs and Nigel Hawthorne. I think that's Ben Kingsley and Mel Smith. So yeah, it's all coming to me now. And that other guy, Richard Guy, who's really funny as Sir Andrew Aguecheek. Imelda Staunton. So there you go. Fantastic film. Absolutely brilliant to watch together after you've read it. And talk about at the end why it's not a pure comedy, but there's a little bit of tragedy at the end, because not everybody ends up happy. So that's my introduction for Shakespeare. 5 things to do with teens for Shakespeare. And I hope you've enjoyed it. If you have any questions or comments, please put them into the comments at the bottom here. I will respond to them and give you more ideas, or work through some issues if you end up having some problem that you want to work through about Shakespeare. If you want to know why to read Shakespeare, I did a podcast with Seven Sisters Homeschooling High School podcast about Shakespeare, about reasons why to do Shakespeare. And I teach it In Dreaming Spires Home Learning Renaissance Lit class, we do Richard II, Macbeth, and Much Ado About Nothing throughout the year, along with other things like Fairy Queen and Pilgrim's Progress. And I've been Kat Patrick with Dreaming Spires Home Learning. I've been talking about doing Shakespeare with teens, and I hope to do another one of these soon. I'll talk to you again later. Bye.